The world ended on December 21st, 2012. That was the day the People's Republic of China requested international aid for a pandemic they had tried and failed to contain and treat within their own borders. The disease, officially designated as Zayton rabies, was a highly aggressive virus. It spread fast. It had a nearly 100% fatality rate, and it plunged the world into hell. You could contract it in a variety of ways. You could inhale the ashes of the cremated victims. You could ingest it, as many a wastelander would learn the fatal way after forgetting to check where they were drinking from. But the most common way was from the victim itself, in the form of a bite. Much like its namesake, Zayton rabies slowly but surely destroyed the nervous system, transforming the afflicted from loving, thinking individuals into feral monsters that lived to kill and eat. But Zayton rabies went a step further. The afflicted's heart would stop, and yet they would continue to move. They lost the need to sleep or eat, but still retained an insatiable hunger for fresh, raw flesh. The flesh would necrotize and rot on their very bones, and yet they existed in some frozen form of unlife. And while it was possible to get bitten and fight off the virus, those who successfully did so were few and far between, and required a glut of medical supplies that were quickly becoming rare as the virus spread bite by bite by bite. It didn't take long before we started calling them what they really were: zombies. And if things had ended there, maybe we could have had a chance. Yes, the undead were relentless, but they were also slow and weak. Most of those who died were overwhelmed by their sheer numbers or cornered and trapped. But it didn't take long for people to learn how to adapt, to outwit, to destroy them. The virus exploded, surged out of China and across the world, but together, governments mobilized. Task forces were formed. A collective panel of the world's best and brightest began to work on a cure, and the tide began to turn. But then the virus mutated. First came the runners. The walkers, as we came to call the original strain, were slow shufflers. They called to each other with groans, attracting hordes, thousands strong, that would quickly tear apart those they could manage to surround. But they could be outjogged with ease. Runners, on the other hand, were fast, faster than most people. They ambushed out of dark alleys and woods, screaming with rage and killing many by surprise. Then there were the ghosts. Lost souls who would gravitate towards the places they knew in life and dumbly pantomime their actions in life, sitting behind cash registers in looted stores or dead computer monitors in burnt-down office complexes. Many early scavengers considered them nonviolent, a mistake they learned after looting or performing a similar action that broke the ghost's illusion of ordinary life, quickly turning them as aggressive as runners. Then, tanks. Slow and stupid, even for a zombie, but huge and strong, able to break a man simply by grabbing him in one hand and squeezing. After them, the ghouls, skeletal, tall, fast, stealthy, able to track a man for miles by scent alone, and would work together in packs to hunt down humans. Even man's best friends would eventually become infected, transforming them into the fearsome ferals. Dogs became hellhounds. Cats would become wampuses, horses, nightmares, and each instilled with a craving for human flesh. But the most terrifying were revenants. They were rare, only making up 0.001% of the infected. But they were devastating. All other strains lost their minds. They had the intelligence of animals, but not revenants. They kept their powers of logic and deduction. They retained their memories and even aspects of their personality, and yet they still became monsters. Food would become unpalatable, and they would hunger for the flesh of their former friends and family. They would stop looking at the infection as a disease and instead as a blessing, one they felt obligated to spread to as many as they could. Those that could pass as humans would try to infiltrate settlements and contaminate food and water supplies, trying to infect as many as possible before being caught. When the rot of their flesh became undeniable, they would retreat to the wastes and command the other strains, organizing them into special forces and war bands. They would march with the purpose of razing settlements to the ground. To them, humanity was a lower life form, and zombies a superior evolution. And anyone who would try to get in the way of that ascension was, at best, an obstacle to be eliminated. At worst, lunch. Even so, there was still some hope. The governments that existed still fought. People came together to try and turn the undead tide. The zombie plague had devastated our planet, but even so, maybe we could survive. And then Archangel attacked. A private for-hire militia and a military research and development company. The exact reason why they betrayed humanity was unknown. Most assumed that it was because they had some connection with the creation of Zayton rabies, either directly or indirectly, and they preferred to damn the world than face their shame. At this point, the reason is irrelevant. Exhausted from fighting the undead and completely unprepared for a tactical, coordinated strike from the living, the forces of civilization crumbled. Most world governments dissolved or disappeared. Even the mighty forces that once ruled this land, the United States of America, retreated across the country and over the seas to the island of Hawaii, licking their wounds and promising a counteroffensive that most believed would never come. And amidst all this, still some survived, and together they gathered. Those following the American army and left behind in California would form the Republic of California, an echo of the country they once loved that had now abandoned them, a government of democracy and capitalism led by their beloved president, Sammy Vaughan. To the north, in the windswept plains, others would attempt to use the devastation wrought as a chance to rebuild better in the communist experiment of the Dakota Free Zone, led by a man named Nash, who would attempt to find a balance between their eternal optimism and the economic disaster their ideals created. Further north, in a country formerly known as Canada, Lucas Crossley rose to power, appointing himself king over the feudal empire known as the Kingdom of Quebec, where royal houses competed amongst each other for Crossley's favor, and the peasantry was squashed underneath their heel. South, across the Great Lakes, and stretched across the rotting skyline of the former great city of Chicago, Samantha Black Hawk would form the Chicago Skyways, together with her squadron of abandoned soldiers, taking care of their own and ignoring the screaming pleas for salvation underneath them with callous indifference. In the tropical waters off the coast of Florida, the insane criminal El Alicado created Margaritaville, a haven for raiders and slavers, filled with the worst specimens of humanity the wasteland had to offer. Hundreds more settlements, only a dozen or so strong, would dot the wasteland, too numerous to count, and connecting all this was the constant trade network of the caravan, a long-moving convoy of vehicles that bartered for supplies and circulated them across each of those last specimens of civilization. But as the living organized, so too did the dead. 3 revenants would emerge from the North American wasteland, gathering the zombies under them. In the wastes of the once great metropolis of New York City, the self-appointed President of the United States, Kate Schiller, ruled, obsessed with poisoning and destroying the waters and soil humanity relied on in order to starve out the living. In the humid swamps of New Orleans, a revenant known only as Caesar gathered his forces into fearsome war bands to slaughter human settlements. And in the former Sin City of Las Vegas, the former mobster Russo rose, eager to use intimidation and psychological warfare to crush the human spirit once and for all. Ghosts would gather in the former sprawl of Kansas City, renaming it on many maps to Ghost City, and causing some to whisper of a great treasure there the damned gathered to protect, and everywhere else in the suburbs and cul-de-sacs of former family homes, in the ruined skyscrapers of urban places now burnt to shells, in the fields and the roads, and in the dark of night, the dead walked the earth, never stopping, never resting, never satiated, until every human was eaten or dead themselves. So humanity gathered in the twilight of its species, huddled amongst themselves and waiting until the world finally ended. And it might have stayed that way too, if the virus hadn't twisted again and brought forth the most unlikely of heroes.
Howdy, my name's Richard, and I died 8 years ago. The world ended when I was just about to graduate high school in 2012. One day I was stressing over my grades, and then the next day everyone I knew was trying to eat me. My family tried to hole up in the roof of my old high school, where we'd barricade the doors and wait for help, but, Mom and Dad didn't make it. They stayed behind so my brother, Joshua, and I could escape. We had made it to the roof, but we had left most of our supplies behind when we ran. Food we had only lasted a few days, and after a week I tried the cafeteria to see what I could find. Except on the way back, I dropped a bunch of cans down the stairs, and the whole school suddenly knew where I was. I almost made it back to the roof. Almost. As I was out the door, I got dragged back in, and, things get a bit fuzzy. I remember Joshua screaming. I remember the bites. And then I remember standing over his body, surrounded by dead zombies. I try not to think about it, but I know I killed my brother, and I know I ate him while I was blacked out. Since then, I spend a lot of my time alone, occasionally bumping into other survivors, but doing my best to avoid them, especially with the changes I was going through. My teeth had fallen out, only to be replaced by real sharp ones. Thankfully, though, bandana covers that up pretty well. Then one day I ripped myself up when bones came through my arms and shoulders. It took a while to figure those out, but I can hide them. For the longest time, I blamed myself for Joshua's death, and I hated that I'm the one standing here now. I think I'm finally making peace with it, though, and I'm doing my best to make the most of my second chance. I hope I can be someone he's proud of.
My name is John, and I died a few years after the world ended. 2015, I think. I was a con man before. After the end, I was a con man too. Only, I wasn't alone. I met a man by the name of Samuel, once a Marine. Together, we ran up and down the U.S., getting our bread off the trust and goodwill of others. We'd smile to their face and take what we could get, leave them smiling as we robbed them blind. Last big score we'd ever need, Ghost City, what was once Kansas City. Ain't no one knew what was in there, only that it was big. Had to be. Zombies were bringing stuff in, right? And it was full of ghosts. All Sam and I had to do was play along, sneak around, scout it out, try to get at it if we could, or sell the information if we couldn't. But damn if we didn't find something big. Some kind of vault full of who knows what. Samuel knows. I don't. Shot me in the back right before the door. I woke up different, naked. I tried to groan, but I didn't have a mouth. I couldn't scream either. But when I remembered my mouth, my face split down the middle. I was cold, and when I remembered my clothes, my skin, well, clothes just kind of appeared on me. My body changed with my thoughts. It wasn't long after that I learned to rearrange things in clever ways that don't bear dwelling on. It was hard adjusting, but I managed. Now, well, call it a wake-up call, call it a second chance that most people don't get. Either way, my old life got me a bullet in the back. Maybe this time, it'll be different. And Samuel? Well, that's my old life. I ain't worried about it. But, why? Do you know somebody like that?